Hello. My name is Matthew Weil. I work as the head of product for a company called Voicesage. And what we do is remove barriers to engagement between a business and a customer because we live in a conversational economy. What I mean is that since supply and demand met each other, there was a conversation that needed to happen, right? And back in the day, if I needed something, I went to my local shop, probably only shop within about 100 miles. And that person knew me intimately. They knew my family, they knew how my season was going, and knew what I wanted. With the advent of technology, I didn't need to go to the shop anymore. It opened up my opportunities as a consumer, but also made it very hard for a business to be able to attract me to their store because I had such a wide choice. So as technology advanced, we moved to voice and then to email, which is essentially the first social media platform out there. When you can reply all to people, you're immediately connecting with 50 to 100 people, whereas before it was just one-to-one. So with the advent of this tech, again, it made it much harder for a business to make contact, and that whole holistic experience was reduced. Good for a consumer, bad for a business. And with the way the technology is going today, at the speed it's going today, with something new coming out every 6 months, that gap is only getting bigger and bigger. So we feel at Voicesage that social media, chatbots, and then to an extent IoT are reducing that gap and being able to create a one-to-one relationship again with a business and a consumer. So our company specializes in providing all those services with one integration. So you can see one integration into Voicesage with multiple integrations out the other side. So I know that SMS and email can seem boring now, and they kind of are, but we have a company last year who sent 80 million text messages. That's 80 million pieces of data, 80 million contacts, right? And data is the new oil, for sure. Unrefined doesn't have much value at all, but as soon as you refine it, you unleash the potential that is the data that you're sitting on. And before it was prohibitive. You didn't have the processing power for the analytics. Now with API integrations into IBM Watson, maybe Microsoft Power BI, that power is unleashed, right? And for you guys, it's very important. So being that we are at a social media presentation, I'll start talking about social media. I'm going to talk about 3 pieces today, which is Facebook, Twitter, and Weibo. So, most people are going to ask what Weibo is. It's kind of a mesh between both Facebook and Twitter, but with the added benefit of being a complete business ecosystem. So Weibo is a Chinese company. So I'll start with Facebook, and I'll ask for a show of hands, which I can't see, but who has a Facebook account? Right. I think most of you raised your hand, which is important. Okay, so from a business, you can't ignore this. You just have an immediate interaction between your customers. So what started with a small beginning in a dorm room has now changed the world. So we had the Arab Spring a couple of years ago that was created and talked about by Facebook and Twitter, something that we probably wouldn't have heard about or something that mightn't even have happened without Facebook. So it's changing the world. And our perception with Facebook now is like it's an everyday occurrence, an everyday thing. So I and a lot of the people in this auditorium remember life before Facebook. But there'll be some of you here in first year and second year who don't. You have a completely different perception of social media and Facebook because you grew up with it, right? So it went from being kind of a social thing to being a business. So companies are paying big monies to promote a post. And there's news companies as well that are producing fake news, so they'll sell an ad and they'll make a wild accusation that mightn't be true. They don't care. They just want to get penetration into the market. So again, with people in first year, your experience is different than mine because when I was in school, bullies had to work between 9 and 5, business hours. Nowadays, it's 24/7, 365. All right, so that again is a different mentality for people, a different risk. So along with the negative aspects, you also have fake accounts, which is another big problem. So you don't know what's real and what's not. Okay, hands up for Twitter. Yeah, thank you. Which is just about the same with Facebook. But again, you're talking about 500 million tweets that are sent a day. And that is a direct connection with the consumer. So a good story about this is my wife, who is a celiac, right? That's an autoimmune disease where you can't have wheat. Seems simple enough, but everything's got wheat in it. So she was at a supermarket the other day, went through the aisle, which is specific for gluten-free, and noticed that there was a mix of non-gluten and gluten. So she tweeted to this company and said, get your stuff sorted. And within 5 to 10 minutes, she had a tweet back where they said sorry, and then we'll make a change to it. So the next day, she was telling everyone she knew about this. She became a brand advocate. And you can understand the power of Twitter then after that. So a direct connection is possible. But then you also have the flip side of that, which is where you have maybe 20 to 30 million fake accounts. And you also have people in high positions of power, current president of the United States that's tweeting about his daughter's clothing line in Nordstrom's. Okay, so where's the line between politicians and self-gaining marketing? It's been blurred. So moving on to the combination of the two is Weibo, which shouldn't really be, because China has some of the most restrictive internet laws in the world, okay? But yet there are 500 million registered users of Weibo, and they're all talking, and they're on it from the moment they wake up. The difference between Weibo, Facebook, and Twitter is that on Weibo, you're buying stuff, okay? It's a complete business ecosystem. So they're able to talk, but they're also able to converse, and they're also able to transact, which is what Facebook and Twitter are trying to catch up with, right? But they're having problems. So the perception over there is that you wake up and you go onto Weibo. You spend your day there, and you talk. And the Chinese government is listening. That's kind of the reason why it's there, right? China doesn't let Facebook and Twitter in for good reason, because they think they're going to have alternative governments coming in and affecting them. So what they do is they created their own. So they created their own power, they have control over it, but they also keep all the money in China, which is another good part. So again, with Weibo, you have people who can follow you. So everyone's familiar with Katy Perry, right? So Katy Perry has 80 million followers on Twitter. So there's the equivalent of Katy Perry in China, and her name is Yao Chen. She's got 80 million followers as well. I guarantee you, everyone in China knows who Katy Perry is, but I would say no one knows. I've heard that name before that I said. 80 million people follow her. 80 million people listen to what she says on a daily basis. So the fear that I have with Weibo is that Chinese government as well would suggest what people should like, okay? Which is, again, blurring the lines between what's real and what's not. So I know it's a bit contrived for me to think that other governments aren't listening to what we're saying on our social media, so we're all familiar with Edward Snowden and the NSA. And I guess anybody who hasn't heard of the NSA, they've heard of you, okay? These guys got satellites looking on other satellites. They are listening. So I've been talking about how it was hard for business to create that relationship with a customer. And I see chatbots as being another great leap forward in reducing that gap. So chatbots at the moment kind of started in 2016, didn't really go that far because the chatbots were trying to imitate a human being. So you had a computer asking someone how the Arsenal game went, okay? Immediately we saw through that and realized this was just contrived. But at the moment, I think chatbots are perfect for marketing and then for some payments as well. So my story about chatbots is a true experience. So I went to Powerscourt Gardens the other day, about 2 weeks ago. Went for a walk there, went up into this round tower where they had a a shed on top of it where everyone had carved their name into the wood, right? People from around the world had gone there and carved their name. And I noticed that there was a chatbot, a QR code on the wall that I scanned. It was actually someone's chatbot, some guy from Seattle. So immediately I was having a conversation with what was an inanimate object, Instead of just looking at a carved piece of wood, I was actually talking to someone, looking at photos of their trip, and then being able to interact with it the same way. So ever since then, wherever I go, I'm thinking about how to interact with something that I'm at. So today I was at a bus stop, and there was an ad for a loan from a bank that I'm a part of. And I thought it would be perfect to have a chatbot there where I could interact with the ad then and there, right? It would know who I was because I'm a member of the bank, and I'd be able to apply for the loan then and there. So that's where you're going. It becomes obtainable to have these chatbots just there and the way that we're going. So along with messaging, chatbots, and now IoT, as well as another step in the direction of just working in a completely immersed economy. So we're all familiar with the idea of cloud computing, and by definition of the cloud, it's kind of disjointed. It's away from us. And with IoT, we're working in a fog, okay, completely immersed in tech. So a buddy of mine has a Tesla car, it's an electric car, Elon Musk. It was a guy who was on this stage about 2 years ago. And he told me that he can be driving down the M50, and all of a sudden he'll get a notification from somewhere in California that there was an issue with the car, and that has been fixed. And this is from the power of the IoT devices that are in the car, Internet of Things. So we're working on a chatbot for Tesla and Elon. He just doesn't know it yet. And but the idea is that if I ever wanted to get a Tesla, I think probably the only one I could afford would be a used car. So buying a used car is going to be the second most expensive thing that I'll do in my life, apart from buying a house. It's also one of the riskiest, because I'm totally dependent on someone telling me the truth behind the car. But with the integrated chatbot and integrated IoT device, I'm able to query the car directly. Okay, so I can ask the car if it's ever been in an accident and get an actual answer from the car. I can ask when the brakes need to be replaced. I can ask if there's a battery that's faulty. I can ask how many owners have been there. I'm actually interacting with a car. Okay, that's a big step forward, and just kind of what I would say to people starting a business. This is the possibility is there now as well. So, in conclusion, for a business, startup or established, you can't pick just one mode of communication. You need to have all, right? So it's a wide breadth of engagement methods. And with social media, bots, and IoT, that whole ability to create a targeted, holistic experience with your customers is back, whereas before it was disjointed. So thanks very much.